Yeah, there it is. All right, so let's go here. And we're going to talk about this word right here. Find the intercepts. Oops, come on, pen. Help me out. There we go. Okay, find the intercepts from a graph. So let's talk about basically what an intercept is. So let's draw a little X and Y axis. Hopefully you're taking notes on this. Should always be taking notes. Whatever I write down here, you should be writing down at least that much. I'm going to put arrows on both of these axes. This is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. It's supposed to be an arrow right there. It looks kind of weird. And let's go to a different color. Let's go to this red right here. What I'm going to do is just draw some funky looking graph. All right. So it's going to have a curve. It's not like a particular equation or anything like that. Whoops. There we go. Little squiggly in parts, but you get the idea. All right, don't worry. You're not going to have to like graph something like this. This is just to show you what the intercepts are. So you know the word intersect, right? If it intersects, it crosses. Well, that's kind of what intercept is, okay? Except it's talking about a particular point where it crosses a certain place, okay? And when we talk about intercepts, we're talking about where it crosses the x-axis and where it crosses the y-axis. Everybody with me? Not just crosses, but touches, at least touches. It may not go all the way through it, okay, but at least it touches it on either the x-axis or the y-axis. Do you see a couple places, maybe more than a couple places, where it either touches it or crosses it? Tell me when. Tell me when. Okay, right there. Thank you. When. Very good. So it crosses right here. It actually doesn't cross. What does it do right there? It touches, okay? At least I tried to make it touch, okay? So it touches right there. Tell me another place where it crosses either the x or the y-axis, okay? Now talk to me. Come on, play along, all right? So I'm going, tell me when. Okay, good. Okay, now you guys are getting the hang of it. So it crosses the y-axis right here. So what kind of intercept do we call this one? What axis does it cross? The x-axis. So we call it the what? The X-Intercept. Or we call it an X-Intercept, okay, or a X-Intercept. It's not just the only one, but it's an X-Intercept, all right? And what do you think we call this one right here? Very good. See, even Monday morning, you're catching on. All right, let's keep going. Stop me when we get to another intercept. Ready? I'm going along here. Okay, stop right there. So what do we call that? That's also an X-Intercept. All right, so that's an X-Intercept as well. All right, tell me how many more intercepts do we have on this graph? Just one more. Tell me when. Boom, right there, and stop. So what kind of intercept is this one? That's also an X-Intercept. All right, we good? Now, if I knew where these points were, okay, so let's say this was like at -10 or something. Okay, and I ask you, what are the X-intercepts? Let's make up a point for this. I don't know, how far do you think this one is? If that's -10, what do you think this is? Probably 7 maybe. What do you think this one is right there? Maybe like 12? I don't know, just guessing, who knows? What about this Y-intercept? Where do you think on the Y-axis compared to the other ones? Maybe that's at 5. We'll call it 5, okay? Just guessing, I don't know, we just made it up. All right, so if I ask you for all the X-intercepts, if I asked you to list all the X-intercepts, that's the word right there. Okay, I just put INT for short, but the word is intercept. So if I asked you for all the X-intercepts, first of all, how many X-intercepts are there on this particular graph? There's 3 of them, okay? So what would the point be? Okay, it's an ordered pair. What would the X-intercept be at this point right here? -10, 0, very good. Okay, what would this X-intercept be right here? It'd be 7, 0, and this X-intercept, 12, 0. Do you, what's kind of like in common with all 3 of these? It's all zeros, okay? Because where it crosses the X-axis, you don't go up or down on the Y-axis. You with me on that? Okay, so listen, in order, we're going to get to this in a few minutes, but this is kind of like seeing ahead a little bit, all right? In order to find where the X-intercept is, what's the Y always going to be? It's going to be 0. Everybody with me on that? Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. And we're going to do some math. We're going to do some algebra, all right, in order to find the x-intercept. But how do you think you find the x-intercept? You set the y equal to what? 0, all right? You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. What about this point right here, the y-intercept? What would the y-intercept, let's put the ordered pair right here. What would the y-intercept be if it crosses the y-axis at 5? These were all x0, x0, x0. What's this going to be? How do we get to that point right there? It's a 5. What is that point? 0, 5. Very good. Now, that's the only y-intercept I have. Okay, but if I had a graph, I don't know, if I had a graph going something like this, you could have more than one y-intercept. You with me on that? Okay, we're just going to talk about this one. It only has one y-intercept. So the y-intercept would be 0, 5. So guess what is going to be true about all the y-intercepts? For instance, what if I had a, let's just put that graph back, or that little line back on there. What if I had a point right here, a point right here, and a point right here? Those are all 3 y-intercepts, aren't they? So what would the ordered pair be for all these? What's in common, I should say? What's in common with all 3 of these? You guys not coming to class? All right. They'd all have 0 where? On the x. That's right. Okay. So anytime you have a y-intercept, what is the x going to be? The x is always going to be what? 0. Anytime you have an x-intercept, what's the y going to be? It's going to be 0. You with me on that? All right. So the opposite one. So if I ask you the y-intercept, the opposite one, which is x, that's always going to be 0. If I ask you for the x-intercept, the opposite one, the y, that's always going to be 0. Make sense? All right. They give you another example. That wasn't actually an example. This is a real example. So let's change colors. I like this blue. So let's do example 4. This is in the book, example 4, and it gives you a crazy x and y axis. Well, the x and y axis isn't crazy. The graph itself is a little bit crazy looking. And let's do it in red again. We'll keep the same color for our graph. Let's see. They come over here. I'm not going to draw all the things, but they put a point at -3 here. They put a point at +3 right there. They put one right here at, what do they call that? -1 1/3 or -4 thirds. Okay. And then they put one down here at -3 1/2. Where would -3 1/2 be? About right there. -3 1/2. Really, it's the same thing. And then over here, they put one at 4 1/2. It doesn't look like much like a 4. It looks like a 9, doesn't it? Let's try to make it look like a 4. 4 1/2. All right, that's that point right there. And it really doesn't matter how crazy the graph looks. And this graph does look kind of crazy. Are you looking in the book? Example 4, do you see it? Looks pretty crazy, doesn't it? I'm going to try to attempt. Oops, that was bad right off the bat. There we go. All right, kind of goes like this. And then it curves up to the 3. Oh, I forgot one, didn't I? 3 1/2, or 3 halves, I'm sorry, 1 1/2. So let's put it, I don't know, about right there. That's 3 halves. Where should I put the 3 halves? Let's put that right there. Okay, so then the graph comes down like this. It comes through here, and it comes through here. Oops. And whoa, that was weird looking. My hand's a little shaky. Probably from partying so much after the Super Bowl. Not really. You know what I did during the halftime show? I put together a computer desk. So yeah, that was much more exciting for me than watching the halftime show, because it's funny, I get on Facebook and all these kids that I taught years and years ago, they're like, oh, I love all this old school stuff. And I'm like, old school stuff, man. This is like, if you say like Dr. Dre or whoever the other people were, I don't even know who it was. Like, who was that girl, Mary Blige or something like that? I mean, I've heard their names, obviously, but I couldn't tell you one thing. If you played every single song that they ever made, I couldn't pick out one of them. So, but all these people that they think they're old, and I'm looking, I'm thinking, to me, that's still new music. I don't know. Or music. I'll put that in air quotes. I don't know if we call it music. Anyway, boy, it looks like it did have a late night, doesn't it? With those lines. I really didn't. So anyway, it's going to ask you what are the X-intercepts and what are the Y-intercepts. So let's come over here. Sorry, I just had to give my old man personal opinion on the Super Bowl halftime show. You figured that would probably be my take on it, wouldn't you? All right, so it asks you what the X-intercepts, let's write the whole word on this one. It asks you to list all the X-intercepts, and it asks you to list all the Y-intercepts. But they definitely were not doing the halftime show for me, so, you know, I get it, believe me. All right, let's do the X-intercepts. So let's find out where it crosses the X-axis. It's basically what we just did before, but this is like the official example, all right? So where? Give me some X-intercepts. How many are there, by the way? How many X-intercepts are there on this? 3. All right, there's one right here, and one right here. Agreed? All right, so let's write them out. How do we write? If they ask you, what is the X-intercept? How do we write it? Do I just say -3? No, you got to write it as an ordered pair. So what is the ordered pair for that X-intercept right there? It's -3, 0. Just like we did before, nothing new. All right? Give me the next one as we go to the right. Right there. What point is that? It's 3 halves, isn't it? Or 1.5. All right, 3 halves what? 0. And we got one more. What's the next one? 4.5. And they put 4.5, whatever. Did you notice something about the Y's? What are all the Y's? 0. And they should be. We talked about that a second ago. All right? That's going to come into play. I'm just reminding you because we're going to do some real math kind of stuff in a minute. Let's do all the Y-intercepts. Now, the other graph we did only had one Y-intercept. This has how many? Where does it cross the Y-axis? Or just touch the Y-axis, either way. There's one place, right, where it hits the Y-axis. Remember, this is the Y-axis, isn't it? And this is the X-axis. So where does it cross the Y-axis? Right here, and right here. It doesn't matter what order you put them in. You want to go from the lowest one to the highest one? Let's do that. So the lowest one would be what? Would it be -3.50? No, it'd be 0, -3.5. All right? And then, what's the next one up? Right there. And that would be 0 what? -4/3. Right? That's how they wrote it, so we'll write it like that. You could write it -1 1/3, all right, to get you a better idea where it's located on the graph, but we're just going to do that. And is there another spot where it hits the Y-axis? Yep, right up here, and that would be what? 0, 3. All right? Wow, this is pretty easy so far, isn't it? Yeah. All right, this is just the beginner stuff on what an X-intercept is and what a Y-intercept is, okay? Because in order to do the stuff that's a little bit tougher, we first have to kind of identify what an X-intercept and Y-intercept actually is. And I think we're good with that. Everybody good? All right. And really, this next part's not all that bad. Maybe. What color do you want to do? We already did blue. Green? All right. How's that green right there? You like that green? So what we're going to do, they have a how to find the intercepts. What kind of intercepts do we have? We have 2 types of intercepts. What are they? The X and the Y. So how to find an X-intercept. I'll just do that. So how to find the intercepts. So how do I find the X-intercept? If I give you an equation, which we're going to give you in just a second here. If I give you an equation, how are we going to find the X-intercept? We're going to set, I've said this a couple times already, we're going to set something equal to 0, right? Y equal to 0. That's what we're going to do. We're going to set Y equal to 0, and then what we're going to do is we're going to solve for X. So we're going to make Y equal to 0. You'll see it in a second. I'm going to give you an equation, an algebraic equation, okay, with X and Y in it. We're going to take the Y, we're going to make that as 0, and then we're just going to do some math and solve for X. You with me? And that's how we're going to find the x-intercept on that particular equation. Secondly, what do you think the next one is? What's the other intercept we're going to find? The y-intercept. Good. And what are we going to do here? We're going to set the x equal to 0, and we're going to solve for what? For y. Getting the idea? So we kind of saw it in our head with the graph, right? It kind of makes sense, right? If I would have just started off with this, you're like, well, why do you do that? What's the purpose of doing that? Well, now you know, right? Because you saw where it crosses and what the zeros were and all that kind of stuff. So here's an example. Everybody got that down? I'm going to scooch it up a little bit. All right, to find the y-intercept, you set x equal to 0, and then you solve for y. All right, so let's do example 5. Let's stick with the green. Haven't used it that much yet. So example 5, it says find the x-intercept and the y-intercept of the graph. Now, they say graph, but they're going to give you an equation. Remember, we talked about this the other day. An equation can be turned into a graph, right? So they're going to give you an equation, and we're going to graph it. And we're going to show you that finding the x-intercept and the y-intercept actually helps you a little bit on graphing these equations we're going to do. So it's y equals x squared. Remember we did this equation, when did we have class? Thursday? Okay, we did this equation on Thursday. Do you remember what it looked like? We had a name. I gave you a specific name for it. It starts with a P. Parabola. Okay, remember that? So this is going to be a parabola, but we're going to add one more thing to it. We kind of did that. You remember I pulled out that graph thing, right? And that graph program, right? And we put x squared, and then we moved it to the left, moved it to the right, up and down, and all that kind of stuff, all right? So that's kind of what we're going to do here. Yep.
What was the graph thing called?
It's called Desmos, D-E-S.
You use that on a tester?
It depends. It depends. But I would put it on your phone, okay? I don't know if there's an app or if you just go to the website. I can't remember. There might be an app for it. It's on my phone, so I can't. It's probably an app. All right, it's DESMOS. It's like graphing calculator or something like that. All right, so I would suggest putting it on your phone. All right, because there will be some times we're going to have to graph some stuff, and it's nice to be able to just pull out your phone and be able to graph it. Okay, this is way better than the graphing calculator. It used to be we had like a TI-86 or 7, or I forget the numbers now. It's been 10 years since I've taught math, and I haven't used a graphing calculator in that amount of time. So whatever the numbers are now. But I tell you what, this is so much easier. It's so much better, I think, anyway. So this is our equation, and we are going to have to graph it. It says find the x-intercepts of the graph, and we also want to graph it. Put it on the table. Don't give it to me. And take a thing. Take a thing. Just look. Look. Don't ask. Just look. You see it right in front of you. All right. So, all right, let's do it. Let's find the x-intercept. So let's find the x-intercept. So what do we do to find the x-intercept? We just wrote it down in your notes. Look at your notes. What do? We set what? Set y equal to 0, and then we solve for x. Everybody with me? So let's take our little equation, which is right there. Put it in a box so you see it a little bit better. So we're going to take this. We're going to set y equal to 0, and then we're going to solve for x. So let's do that. What do we get? 0 equals what? X squared minus 4. And what are we doing now? We're solving for what? There's only one thing to solve for. Solve for x, right? So how can you do that? Pretty easy. Add a 4 to both sides, right? So I would get 4 equals x squared. Then we solve for x. How do we solve for x? Take the square root. But when we take the square root, what do we have to put out in front of it? Remember this? This is really important. No i's. Plus or minus. Good. Put a plus or minus. That makes a big difference. Okay? So we do the math. What do we get? X equals plus or minus what? 2. That's the x-intercept. Tell you the truth, it's not really the x-intercept because we want to write it as an ordered pair. So how do we write it as an ordered pair? Remember, we set y equal to 0, so that's always going to be 0. So what do we put here? You could put a -2, and you could put a +2. So this particular equation crosses the x-axis or touches it. Okay, it could just touch it, but it either crosses it or it touches it at these 2 points on the x-axis. So I could start my graph by making my x and y axis, put a point at -2, 0, and a point at 2, 0. That's not quite enough to be able to graph it, but it's a good start. So what else can we do? We can find the what? Because we've got to find both intercepts. So we found the x-intercept. So now let's find the y-intercept. So how do we find the y-intercept? What do we set? Set x equal to 0. Remember, you always take the opposite one. Set x equal to 0, and then we're going to solve for y. I'm going to write down the formula again so you remember. Okay, there it is. So what are we doing? We're going to take x and make that equal to 0. So let's do it. Y equals 0 squared minus 4. What's 0 squared? It's 0. What's 0 minus 4? It's -4. So what's your y-intercept? It's 0, -4. Remember, we set the x equal to 0, so that's going to be 0, and the y is going to be -4. So we have these 3 things. Let's, can we remember? Well, you got them on your notes. I'm going to slide this up. So let's see our intercepts. I'm going to rewrite them. If I can get my pen to work. There it is. So the x-intercepts were what? -2, 0, and +2, 0. Is that right? Okay, and then the y-intercept, what was that again? I forget it already. 0, -4. Okay. All right, so let's draw a little x and y axis. I'll tell you what. Let me get that graph. Let's go all the way to the top, and let's push this over. Let me grab this thing. All right, and slide this down. Slide this over. Let's move it over like there. There we go. And then, so it'll be a little bit nicer on this nice, pretty graph with the grids and all that kind of stuff. Okay? Well, of course, I had all my intercepts there. Let's push this up where I can see this stuff. Sorry about this. Put that over here. Slide it up a little bit. There we go. Oops, almost. Come on. There it is. All right. Let's, why don't you graph this in red, just to make it look a little bit nicer. All right, let's put the x and y-intercepts in here. So the x-intercept is -2, 0. So -2, 0 would be right there. The other x-intercept is +2, 0. Now, with just those 2 points, would I be able to graph this? Not really, okay? I got to know something else. The y-intercept, where's the y-intercept? It's at 0, -4. So there's 0, and I go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, we've seen this already. We saw, remember what our equation was? It was this right here. Remember, y equals x squared. You should know. We already showed you this before, okay? Even put it on that graph, on that Desmos thing. You should have an idea what it looks like. It looks like a parabola, all right? We're going to talk more in depth about graphing parabolas, probably in this chapter. I can't remember exactly where. But we're going to talk more in depth about graphing these things. So we're just kind of starting out now. But we know a little bit about it. We know that it's a curve, right? When it's x squared, we know it's a curve, and it kind of looks like a bowl, all right? Kind of like this, all right? And so this is kind of like the skeleton part of our equation. Would you agree? All right? So what we can do is we kind of know what it looks like. So really, I can just start drawing without putting any other points in there. And then this kind of curves like this, a little squiggly. There you go. And that's basically your graph, because they will ask you to graph it, and that's what you want to do. Okay? It's kind of a sketch of a graph, a little bit of a sketch of a graph, but I've got some important, that should have gone right through -2. I kind of missed it a little bit, but that should have hit right there, it should hit right there, and it should hit right there. Okay, those are the key points that really what I'm looking for. So would you agree that that's a little bit better than doing this stuff, right? And then putting in a whole bunch of points and putting it into your equation and figure out where they're supposed to go. Finding the x-intercept and the y-intercept is really, really helpful. It's really helpful to graph these things. So that's one way to do it. There's other ways to do this. Just looking at this, the more we do parabolas, you're going to look at this -4 right there. You're going to say, okay, this is like a normal everyday parabola, except you're going to drop it down 4 places. Isn't that what this is? It's like an everyday parabola, except we just took it, instead of starting here, it starts down here at -4. So the more of these things you do, you should be able to look at it and recognize in your head before you even start putting points in there what this graph's going to look like. All right, and that's ahead a little bit, but I'm just trying to get you to see what's going on. We good with this? Yes? No? Maybe? All right. Well, you had a homework, right? I gave everybody lesson plans. So your homework is, we're going to call it section 2.2, part 1, and it's page 171. You should have it right in front of you, but I'm putting it on here anyway, just in case somebody watches this video, on the off chance that anybody actually watches it. And that's it right there, okay? So that's your homework. Always like to circle it. There it is. Everybody good? All right. That's it for today.